Do have a word that I just felt the Father pretty powerfully put on my heart just yesterday, and this is one of those going back into the Jesus parables again. I'll meet you in Luke 18 in just a moment. Before we dig into the text, I want to just give you a couple of thoughts to think on and to chew on, and then we get into a Jesus parable commonly called the Pharisee and the tax collector, or the Pharisee and the publican, and I'll get into the details of that in a moment. But we live in a time when self-help is really popular. I think it has been for at least a generation. Some of the self-help books are always on the top 40 bestsellers. And we're in a time where you can probably help yourself to information better than you've ever been able to before because of technology. You can learn how to do anything on YouTube. If you have to fix something on your car or fix something around your house. I know I'm not really good at fixing stuff, but guys on YouTube are. And I can go look up a guy and watch him do it. And then you can watch him do it as many times as you need to. And you can hit pause right in the middle of it, and you can rewind 15 seconds. And it's perfect. You got an expert in your house that fixes stuff, and you just copycat, and you might be able to pull it off. We live in an era where you can get more information than ever before, and you can do whatever you really put your mind to do, and if you work hard enough to do it. And because of that, we've all had that for decades now, really, and at least a decade, and in a world where we are kind of success driven, because why wouldn't we be? You can do stuff, so you should do stuff. That's caused us to have little mantras about surrounding ourselves with successful people and be near visionaries and create the world you want by changing your circle of friends and get better influences. You know, don't hang around with losers, hang around with winners. If you want to be a loser, hang around with losers. You want to be a winner, hang around with winners. All those things are kind of par for the course, kind of the way we talk. Be careful with it. I didn't say throw it out, but I say be careful with it. Because if you live your life in that system, which I think is the system of the world, it's not the system of the kingdom, which is always be around successful people. Because if that were the system of the kingdom, Jesus did it wrong. He surrounded himself with a bunch of losers, and then he hung out with publicans and tax collectors and kids a lot, who couldn't bring anything to his ministry, by the way. They're not very good givers. And you don't build a church out of it. And yet he surrounds himself with all of this. And so it's not the kingdom way. Again, I'm not saying throw it out, but be careful when you get infatuated with being around only the successful, only the good, only the highly moral, only the upstanding citizen. Because when we're in that mode, that could be a strategy that limits us in a way, because it could limit us to people who easily become their own God. Because whenever it's all about success, and it's all about winning, and it's all about being good, it's easy to feel good when you do good. And you distance yourself from the parts of society that aren't winning, the parts of society that don't do well. It's why in our surround yourself with success mentality, the parables of Jesus seem archaic and sometimes a little silly. He elevates the wrong people in his stories. We've done a few of these stories over the last few months here, where the right people are coming to the party, and then Jesus doesn't commend it, but he rebukes it. Not the kind of party we would throw, is the kind of party Jesus says is what heaven looks like, or what the kingdom looks like. And so I think the reason why those stories start to feel odd, even to the point of sometimes abrasive, the parables of Jesus, is because maybe that's the first indicator that we've so surrounded ourselves with this win now, be successful, pick the right crowd mentality, that the parables of Jesus seem as if they're not speaking to our culture anymore. They're not really speaking our language. Well, I don't know, to be really honest with you, I don't really know the language of the success in the world. I know what it sounds like, but I don't really know how to speak it. But I do know the language of success in the church. Because I was raised in the church and raised around pastors, raised in ministry. And the language of success in the church isn't that much different than the language of success in the world, to be honest with you. It just couches itself in religion and morality. But it's still a bunch of get ahead and be successful and build something big and be ambitious. Sort of the same stuff, often masked in religion or high morals, and in that way kind of applauded and amened in much of the church. And so while I may not have the lingo, the language of the system of the world, I do have the lingo and the language of the system of religion, and what it means to try to do good, and what it means to try to get ahead in the realm of righteousness or goodness. And that looks a lot like some of the parables of Jesus too. And so whether your lingo and your language sounds a lot like the success of the world, or your lingo and language sounds a lot like religion, I want to show you a parable that I think speaks directly into who we are. And I want to caution you before we read any of it. This is one of those parables where you got to be really careful, because I'm learning this. I didn't say I've learned it. I say I'm learning this. When you think upon your first reading that you have something figured out, is when you should pause, read it again, and just remind yourself that it's surely not that easy. All right? And I don't mean you got to make everything tough, but sometimes we've already got stuff figured out the second we read it. We've even got it figured out before we read it. And that blocks us off from learning anything new. Because how can we learn anything new if we're not asking any more questions? I mean, I already know what this means. And so I'm really only kind of reading it just to get my brownie points of reading my chapters today. I don't have anything new to learn in this story. But I'm finding that that's the first sign that there's probably something else there. And as you know, based upon our past together and based upon this lengthy introduction, there's going to be more than meets the eye to this parable.